Hi, this is odeean. Here's something you don't normally see, the inside of my house. And why is this? Because I have this huge box. Project Genesis. Okay, so I wanted to just show this to make it clear. I bought this from Robot Kingdom, and the box that you first saw isn't the shipper. There's a shipper inside a shipper, and Robot Kingdom have been nice enough to pad it with this polystyrene foam to keep it nice and safe. So if I pull this off, you'll see that is really the shipper for Project Genesis. Okay, let's get this huge box open and have a look at what's inside. Okay, so this is what we get when we get it out of the shipper. And I just want to point out that the shipper in the shipper that I showed you before also had bubble wrap inside of it. So this box has come through 100% safe and sound. So I can vouch for Robot Kingdom and Planet X in the way that they package their materials. Okay, this is like a book end box with magnets that hold the door shut. So if I peel back the covers like this, you can see here it really does have big magnets on the edges, and inside we have our third-party Omega Supreme. On each side of the doors we have images of what the figure looks like in robot mode and spaceship mode. Same with the other side over here, robot mode from the back and spaceship mode from the back. And if you're a mint and sealed box collector and you could afford a second copy of this, this is a beautiful piece just to keep inside the case. In and of itself looks really nice on display. I don't think I've got enough money to keep this mint and sealed box. On the back of the box we have an awesome piece of artwork, and I think it's computer generated, although it's hard to tell these days. The line between art and computer art is a little bit blurred, but either way this looks like a fantastic piece, and I wish I had a poster of this because that is really beautiful to look at. I'd put that on my wall, so I'm going to have to take extra care not to damage this box. Anyway, let's get the box open and have a look at the figure inside. So in the box you can see Omega comes in this clamshell. I've pulled the front of the clamshell off here, but the whole thing can slide out without causing any damage whatsoever to the case, so there's no reason to throw the outside part of this box away. As well as that, we get this large instruction sheet in the box, but this is just an instruction sheet and not a poster as I had hoped the other side would contain. Apart from that, the only other thing that I can see so far is this little bio card featuring the same artwork as what is on the back of the box. This card isn't as high quality as some of the thick plastic cards I've shown recently, but it is a very attractive card. It's not junk. So here he is, Planet X's Project Genesis, also known as War for Cybertron Omega Supreme. And before I get into any features or transformation or little technical details, I just want you to see how mind-blowingly awesome this figure is, especially considering this is not licensed by Takara Tomy or Hasbro. This is just a project that a company we'd never heard of before has pumped out, and it's turned out spectacular. So you can see that he doesn't really have any problems standing up in this pose, but there are some poses where he will want to rock or fall over. So it really comes down to this big arm. You can see that the proportions are spot on for the computer model in the game, with his more stocky legs and huge bulked out arms, and it's really impressive to see. So I've put this arm back like that just so he'll stand steady, but you can see if I do this and put both arms out forward, he's not going to stand up like that. But as a display piece, there's no reason that you have to put both arms out at the same time. He's got loads of detail from every angle, panel lines in every molded part, These little red dots here are little screw plugs. There are a whole packet of pieces, not all of them plugs. Some of them were little molded pieces that fit into joints where the screws were. Here's two rectangular ones. He had a whole range of them just to cover up some of the ugly little spots where there were too many screws. It's a bit weird actually that they didn't plug these screws here, which are pretty big, but did plug a whole bunch of screws in other places. I'm not sure what the logic was behind it, but still, it's always appreciated when a few more details are covered. You can see here, or maybe you can't, I'll bend down like this, hang on. You can see here I've got lights, so lights on the ankles, a light in his big grabbing hand here, a light in the chest. I'll show you more about them later, but I've just, for this overview, wanted to show him for as good as he can look. In fact, let's turn off my other light, the majority of it, so you can see them a little bit better. So they're quite bright. I mean, in person they look just right. So on camera they seem to have a little hot spot there. You'll see that it looks more like a white center, like it's too hot in color, but in person they just cause a little red glow, and something about the sensor on the camera picks that up too much and makes it into more of a pinpoint than it really is. Okay, now let's focus in on those lights that I just mentioned. So in my hand here you can see I have 5 of these little nubs. They look like, I don't know, you could imagine maybe they're energon canisters or something like that, and what they are is just 2 little batteries and an LED, and when you put pressure on them on both ends they glow. So there's one end where the LED is, one end that moves. And I mean, this is pretty ingenious. I have never seen this done anywhere else before. There's no switch or anything like that, but what we do is just grab, this is the most easily accessible one, there's a retractable little, what do you call that, depression in there with a spring on it, and all you have to do is grab one of these with the button side down and stick it in the hole and then give it a little twist so it stays in, and there you go. Once it's locked in the on position, so you get a permanent light. I've heard a few complaints that these don't have switches, but you know that's a kind of old way of thinking. I think these are ingenious the way that they work, and with LEDs taking so little power, this has many hours of enjoyment before they run out. The other locations, let me just put the camera down, his ankles here. So again, you just stick it in, give it a little twist so that it stays. That's one on each side. Stick it in, is that right? Yeah, stick it in, give it a little twist. Now inside this big section there's another one, so to access it what you need to do is fold out these panels and just pop the whole thing in half, and then you can slot one in right here. Oh sorry, I've put it in upside down. That's the one thing that I always seem to make a mistake. If you put it in upside down you wonder why it doesn't stay on. It gets a little bit stuck in the upside down position. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. I think there's just something jamming the mechanism on the inside so it doesn't go the whole way in. There we go. Right, pop that back on, bend the panels down, snap the arm back in place, and the final one, now camera back up. It took me a little bit of time to figure out how this is going to get inside here, because none of this seems to bend right, but what it is you turn the Autobot symbol, oh there's no symbol, where the symbol would go, you turn that upside down like that, get some implement, if you've got no fingernails, like a little flathead screwdriver, and just pry it a bit, and what you'll find is this whole front panel very easily comes off. So there's not a huge amount of force needed here. Don't disintegrate your toy trying to force the thing apart, because it's just a bit of force in the right spot and you'll be right. this last light pops into the chest, rotate it around, lock it in, panel goes back on, symbol holder turns, there you are, all the lights are in place. In my hand here you can see the very first thing that I did when I got the box open. So this is Omega Supreme. He's meant to have a face under the visor, and a point of contention has been whether there would be a face with this visor, and I think a little bit of disinformation was being spread by Planet X because they wanted to sell the piece, but unfortunately it turns out that this visor has no face in it whatsoever. Just to once and for all clear that up, if you don't have the figure, here's your evidence that there is no face. But happily, it seems that this panel comes off really simply in a straightforward manner, so it should be possible for any other third party to knock up us a decent face, or for customizers to quite easily make their own face to go in here. It all comes apart easily and goes back together easily, so it should be no trouble for us to get a face for this eventually. Now let's get to some of the detail. You can see these little guns everywhere. So I've got two down here, another two up here, can target in any direction. There's also 4 at the back, so altogether we've got 8, and this is a great idea. It seems that maybe part of the idea of this is from Lego, because in some of the Lego sets I've got, there are turrets that use this kind of ball system. I think on a clone dropship maybe, that's the first time I saw a little ball turret made like this, so perhaps Planet X fans of Lego, I don't know, but either way, this is a really unique thing in the world of Transformers, and I love it. It's a fantastic way to incorporate guns into the toy, and what makes it even more special is that if you don't like the turrets to be pointing out, all you have to do is line it up like this, flip it around, and it becomes flat. It's just another panel on the toy. Same with the ones up here. So line it up with the groove, just turn it around, and it's nice and flush with the rest of the toy. Fantastic. The next feature we've got is this huge grappling claw and weapon in the middle. The fingers are cool, but what is also cool is that if you rotate this collar around the back of it, it's got gears in it, which will give you quite a bit of spin. The only little caveat is that they don't always latch on. So I can't get it to go wrong now, but quite often when the first couple of spins, it won't bite with the gear teeth and doesn't spin. But after you get a bit of a rotation happening, it does pick up and function correctly. Another use for this huge claw is to grab stuff. So it's ratcheted and articulated really well, so you can get it out into good poses depending on how you want it. Clicky joints in the fingers, so if you want to grab a hold of something, he can really do it well. And to demonstrate that, here we have Fall of Cybertron Starscream. A kind of decent figure, nothing special, but Omega can grab a hold of figures like this and just brutally smash them. I mean, look at that. That is one huge pincer. If you've got the Energon Omega Supreme from years ago, that's the kind of gripping that you wish he could accomplish. Let's see if you can spin him around. Look at that. It maintains the grab while he can spin him. That's pretty damn impressive. That claw is in fact so strong that it can support the entire weight of this substantially heavy toy. So it's a little bit precarious. I don't want to lie to anyone. This is just balancing here. But the fact that it can balance sticking up on its arm with those heavy-duty ratchet joints is a testimony to the quality of this figure. But it is balancing. To demonstrate that, give it a little push and it will fall over. So it's a pretty heavy-duty and good claw. As far as other posability is concerned, we've got a very weakly ratcheted joint on the shoulder here that goes forward, and you can see with a little tap that will fall down, and in fact that's probably the weakest point of the entire figure. That forward rotation is not strong enough to hold the weight of the toy, but the more sideways you get this big gun to point, the better it can take the weight. So if I put it like this, there's no way that's going to happen. it'll just fall straight down. But out like this, you know, there are some times when it will hold. Apart from that, we do have a ratcheted, heavy duty ratcheted in and out at the shoulder here, and heavy duty ratchet on the shoulder guard, which is a bit weird. I don't know why we need that. There is a swivel here, but it does get interfered with a little bit by the shoulder mechanism. But you know, you do get a good range of swivel at this joint. The bicep is a bit of a different story. So if you look in here, you can see a massively ratcheted joint at the bicep, but this is just where the arm can snap off. So if you want to bend it, it's a good idea to put your finger down here behind the part where the force is going to be applied, because otherwise you're just going to end up popping this off many times. And even though it seems to be constructed quite well inside this joint here, I guess that after enough snapping on and off of that arm, it may become loose. Just a little bit of caution needed in that case. The other arm behaves exactly like this arm, so I'm not going to bother to show that. But what we do have down here on the hip is it can go out like this. So you can see now it's asymmetrical, close together for ordinary standing poses, or you can ratchet it out like this, and that's on a heavy duty joint as well, which is capable of holding the weight of the whole toy. And what that lets you do is get some wider stances or other degrees of freedom that you wouldn't expect from a toy that looks so stocky as this. Apart from that, we get heavy duty. That is super heavy duty, but it doesn't seem to be any fear of breaking. It's just a really strong click, but not any grind of plastic. And it's quite spectacular actually. You can hear the sound of that. In the ab region here, we've got this side to side, because I've sort of pulled this down to disconnect it. If you plug it back up, it locks into place. We also have ratcheting on the ab crunch, or like a reverse ab crunch here, just one click. And in a toy this size, that's also pretty damn impressive. Next, we've got the knee. So here's the knee. Something's fallen off, I don't know what that is. Anyway, we have a double jointed knee, massively ratcheted double jointed knee. The part that you just heard fall off while I was showing the knee was this, and no harm done, it's just a little piece of molded detail. Nothing holds this in place except friction, so if you really wanted to stop it coming out, a little dab of glue could do that. It's no big deal. I love the fact that we get, let me get this out of the way. I love the fact that we get this molded detail. That's just the icing on top for me, so I'm not worried that that fell out. It can very easily be fixed back into place. The next joint we have is the ankle. So again, super heavy duty and really wide range of motion. This is a better ankle than I've seen on figures half the size of this. It's super impressive. I can't believe that they've actually done this. It just blows my mind. Apart from that, ratcheted ankle tilt and individually articulated toes. So depending on the ankle tilt, you could move the toes so they still maintain contact with the ground. We get a ratcheted swivel above the lower leg, like that. And, can you believe it, a ratcheted waist joint. And I can't believe it. It's just, I truly find this amazing. It's worth every cent. We have the head, which sort of, you got this backwards and forwards movement, and that allows you to rotate it more. So if you want it sunk back in like this, fine, or you can extend it up a bit to give you a gun face or whatever you want. The gun is also articulated. On the back, I'll put my camera up again, excuse me. On the back we have these sections which can move around. It's mainly part of transformation, but you know, it is still a little bit of articulation. And the only other thing was the turrets that I mentioned before. 8 turrets, all individually articulated. So that's about it for articulation. Let's move on to scale. Here's the first scale shot. Keep in mind that Predaking here is standing in front of Project Genesis just because I don't have room, but still Genesis is heaps taller than Predaking. Why am I showing Predaking? I don't know. I like Predaking. He's on my mind at the moment with the Feral Rex being talked about. But so he's as big as anything G1's going to throw at him, except for Max maybe. Here he is with Creator Primus in planet mode. So obviously these guys aren't to scale with each other, but you can imagine Omega Supreme must be one of these little dots somewhere. Maybe he's the tiny little dot in the city up there, standing on top of Cybertron. Here's Omega next to the Jackhammer, and the reason I'm showing this is because I feel this is probably pretty close to accurate scale. Our little legend Cyberverse kind of figures are probably about the size a normal Transformer would be in compared to this Omega Supreme. So again, I'm showing him with another smaller figure, and this is our little Legends Megatron. Say hello, Megatron. He, I also feel, is correctly scaled for Omega Supreme. So that's what we're looking at, how big this guy is meant to be fictionally. At least I have a rough kind of guess anyway. I guess for comparison's sake, this is the main event, really what everyone wants to see. How does Omega Supreme stack up against the Devastator? So on my left here, we've got the Project Genesis. On my right, we have TFC's Hercules with the Passion of Hercules head add-on kit and Rage of Hercules shoulder extenders and forearms. So, you know, they're almost the same size. Of course, Omega has these extensions above his head, but, you know, typically we measure from head to toe. So if we are measuring from head to toe, then Omega Supreme here is just maybe 1 centimeter taller than Hercules. So it's very hard to show these two figures in the same shot together. And you can see he's already... Look at this. Here's the indictment of the quality of Hercules versus how far we've come with this new third-party entrant. What's it called? Planet X. You can see that Hercules just collapsed there on himself because he's become a loose and unstable figure, whereas this Omega Supreme, I don't think the same thing is going to happen here. On Hercules, all the ratchet joints are basically just flexing plastic, providing the force. So, I mean, we've come so far. A few years ago, this Hercules was the dream, and I think everybody, including me, was just exploding with enthusiasm for it when it first came out. But given time and the improvements that have been steadily coming, I think that Genesis here is the new gold standard, and the quality of this makes everything before it kind of pale in comparison, to be honest. Those ratchets definitely count for a lot. The next size comparison here is the obvious one to make, which is how does Project Genesis stack up against what Hasbro has to offer? This on the right is Hasbro's Year of the Snake Asian exclusive, I think, I'm not too sure, Omega Supreme, based on the Transformers Energon mold. I think Energon's back from 2004 perhaps, but either way, I really like this toy. I mean, I bought it as soon as the pre-orders went up for Year of the Snake. I jumped on this figure straight away. I loved the Energon mold. I love the features of the toy. And when I heard there'd be re-moldings like this face, if I can just focus in on it, that's a really good face. So for me, Year of the Snake Omega Supreme is fantastic, and at only $99, the value proposition for this figure is really pretty damn good. I'm not complaining about Year of the Snake at all. So I see a lot of criticism of Year of the Snake Omega Supreme actually, and just on the blockiness of the mold, but you know what? The joints are strong. He can hit a number of poses. He has some cool features. But having said all that, Genesis just blows him away. Year of the Snake has this pincer, like it's their attempt, Hasbro's attempt at doing the game-based design, and that's a retool of the mold. And you know, it's adequate. It serves its purpose. If you stand here and look at it, it does look like a gripping claw, but it is not big enough. And the quality of this plastic here, this is shit plastic. This is the same half-assed attempt at using materials that we've seen in every other toy that Hasbro's released for about a year or a year and a half now. And it really stands out because the rest of this figure is good plastic. It must be the mold wasn't suitable for the crappy plastic that they like to use these days. So what we've got is a well-produced bulk of the toy and this pathetic attempt at a claw. You can just feel, there's something about the feel of it. It's very lightweight and it's lackluster and thin. So, you know, it's a bit of a, it's not so good. And when you see the amazing ratchets, heavy-duty ratchets on Genesis's claw, and the sheer size and weight of it, it's easy to pick which one you should go with. That's not to say don't buy this figure. This is a great figure. It's only in comparison to this figure that this starts to look a little bit half-assed. If I had to own only one of these two, it's an easy choice. The one I would choose to own is Project Genesis, with the little caveat that I want this face, I like this face, and you know what I'm really waiting for is for someone to take this face, just copy it, come on, some third party out there, copy this face, put it on a bit of plastic that I can stick into this guy's head, and there we go. I'm as happy as I can possibly be, because the combination of a real Omega face on this War for Cybertron body, I don't think that could be beaten. Here we've got Project Genesis next to the original Omega Supreme. So you'll have to forgive this guy. He's beat up and old and dirty. I must have played with this toy for hundreds of hours when I was a kid. I've had this for a very long time, and he holds a really special place in me, in my heart. The amount of fun that I've had with this guy over the years. I've had to strip him down and lubricate his joints and ratchets to stop him from cracking up. His mechanism doesn't work anymore. But you know what? I love this figure. So how do I think about Genesis in comparison to G1 Omega Supreme? Well, you know, Project Genesis is a totally different beast to this guy. Genesis is a collector-oriented figure that is mainly probably for posing, but with a wide range of posability. G1 Omega Supreme is not that. That is not what he is. He is pure and simple, a very good toy. And kids can have a lot of fun with G1 Omega Supreme. I wouldn't say the same thing about Genesis, but that's not who Genesis is for. So, you know, which one would I pick? Which one do I like the best? If one of these guys had to stop existing, which would it be? I would lose Genesis, to be honest. I like the idea of G1 Omega Supreme better than any of the other Omega Supremes that have followed. And that's probably why so many have followed. The ability to break down into a base with a tank and a good-looking rocket and a train track, a turret, it's a good idea, and no one has pulled that off as good as the original Omega Supreme. Probably because they don't like the idea of parts forming and losing bits and pieces. So I like that idea, and I'm still waiting for the definitive Omega Supreme. Genesis is a really, really good toy, but he is not the definitive version. I'm waiting for a masterpiece level G1 style Omega Supreme. I don't care about the parts forming. I mean, we can get a guy who can, if he can do the same stuff without breaking down, so be it. But at the moment, still nothing has beat this guy. Now it's time for the transformation. So this thing is heavy and unwieldy, so you'll have to bear with me a bit. Maybe I'll cut some scenes here so that I can get it all in. The first thing is these turrets. I've just folded them all around. Okay. The next step involves popping up these side panels, and then just these panels do open. It says to do it better than what I'm showing here, but basically just wiggle out the tank. So here's the little Omega tank, or whatever you want to call it. I'll give you a better look at that later on, but it does kind of transform, but I don't know exactly why. So putting that down there, we can shut these back up again, fold these little panels down like that. Next we want to bend these parts around like so, then looking at it from the side, open up the doors and just untab the whole long section and stick it back in like this, closing the doors behind it. Do the same thing on the other side. Just fold the whole thing in, shut the doors behind it. The next step is pull this out so it's detached. I'm pulling away like this. It requires some force because it's got one of those Energon style mushroom pegs in the back that hold it on pretty securely. Now you'll see that once I've dislodged that, there's this tiny little panel here, and it's important at this point to fold that around 180 degrees because that's necessary later on. Same thing on the opposite side. So we're just going to fold it around so it faces the other direction, like that. Next, we want to straighten out his arms just so we can see what we're doing here. And this bit can be a little bit, a bit of force required. We just want to dislodge the two side panels of the body, so that they're totally separated like that. The next thing is twist these, just get them sort of out of the way, and it is a bit difficult to keep them out of the way because in this stage they're very, very floppy, but we want to rotate this whole section around like this, so it's basically up the opposite way that it was before. Then what we can do is shift the whole torso and legs, everything around like that, so that the side panels are now on the front and the back respectively. So again, trying to hold these out of the way, we want to move the whole thing up like this and it will just lock in. If you can get it right. What have I done wrong here? I'll tell you what I've done wrong. I've turned it in the wrong direction. So this is the direction it's supposed to be. Now, when I put it right up like this, it does lock in. Just like that. The next step is to grab this other side, which has been dislodged, and we're not going to turn it around. We're just going to lock it back in, like so. So now it's back to where it kind of was. And this little thing that we turned before, the little panel that we turned 180 degrees, that's just going to slide on in and sort of make a connection with that. It's not solid, it's not hugely solid, but in combination with other panels that move later, and I'm a bit stuck here, combination with other panels that tab into it later, it will form a solid connection in the long run. The next step is to slide these panels down the side of the arm just to get them out of the way, like that. You can hear that they're kind of tabbed in, and we've come loose up here. And now it gets a little bit tricky to know exactly which way things are meant to be happening at about this point. So we do have to bend this section up like that, and we want to rotate this around like that. Now we want the bicep to be oriented so that it's capable of bending this way. And if you get it right, it'll do that. It'll form a nice 90-degree bend at each angle so that it's like a Z. And that's it for that. And you can see that the front part has dislodged with the force that I was exerting there. But that's no big deal. You can get that to reconnect. And it's at this point where we want to lock this in so it doesn't fall off anymore. So you'll see on the side here there's a little panel, and if you can just use your fingernail to pry it out, it will make a bond, if you can get it to stay long enough, with this little beam. like that. Once it's on, that's it. It's grabbed on. You can see that that's taking, the tension in here is taking the weight of that side of the body. And that's how it's supposed to be. It's a constant battle with this guy to stop all the little bits from falling apart while you're doing it. But trust me, in the end, it does end up being pretty secure. The next step requires a pretty substantial force. Let me just lower this a bit. But before you can apply that force, you have to untab these swing bars on the front and on the back. So they both just look like this. And you'll see already a little split has started to form. Now I'm going to pull it like that. And it was quite a large force I needed to exert. And the first time you do it, you'll be thinking, oh man, am I going to break this? But no, you're not going to break it. Once you've done that, you want to rotate this joint around 180 degrees, and it will be able to move up into this position. I'm not going to lock it in yet. I'm just going to do the same to the other side to get it all kind of in the right spot to bend the other joints. Now, it's right at this point you'll probably be telling yourself, this looks like a mess. Is this really going anywhere? Well, it is kind of going somewhere, and it will be more solid towards the end. Okay, now we've got all this kind of where we want it. Pick it all up and just rotate the whole groin area right around like that. Okay. Now, looking at these mushroom pegs here, that's where we want this to tab in. So you can hear that, they've tabbed in. And already, just in the act of doing that, these pegs have inserted themselves. So there's these little ports, and the weapons platform here from his back, that side's popped in by itself, and the other side has started. So you can see there, we just want to push that down to peg it in. That's already starting to get more solid now. One little thing to note is that these pegs that go in, I've noticed that the grey detailing can pull out when you unpeg them, which is a little bit unfortunate. I think that maybe they couldn't figure out a good way to have that separate coloured plastic stay in by itself. It's no big deal, it can easily be put back on, but I thought I broke it the first time it happened. We want to rotate this around like this and just give it a good rotation until it points out like that at 90 degrees. So we wanted it to bend where the knee, under the knee, not on top of the knee. Next, we do the same thing for our foot here. Turn it around the other side. Bend under the knee. Bend the foot right around back like that. Now we're almost done. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to twist this around like this. Oh, before I do that, this little piece here needs to fold out, that little peg. We twist the whole thing around like this. We're going to rotate the bicep so that this peg is pointing in the downwards direction. Now, oh, that's not the bicep, that's the shoulder. The next thing is the bicep is above it here. We bend that to a 90-degree angle. And the whole thing will rotate down. And when we get to the sweet spot, that little peg has just tabbed in by itself. So give the whole thing a good squeeze. Make sure that that little strut is engaged. And then, for me, that is where I like to leave it. I think this is the best way the ship looks. It looks kind of more... I can hold it far enough away from this camera, which I can't. It looks kind of more coherent this way with the solid mass at the front. I don't mind these flat sections sticking out. After all, it is a spaceship. It doesn't need to be aerodynamic. But there is a further step, which I'll show you now, and then I'll put it back to this way because this is how I prefer it. We pull these sections open like this, revealing this inner cone. And that will disengage. It just untabs It's got these two big pegs on it, and there's peg holes in there. Then what we want to do is pull it in half, like so. There is a little disc in here. It rotates out into this configuration, and that can, you've got to move this ratcheted section forward so it gives a bit of clearance, and then that will tab in on that side. Do the same for the other piece. Rotate the little disc. It will only go one way, so if it feels like it's stuck, then it's probably moving the wrong way. Put that in on the other side and close up the panel at the front. So that is how the toy is intended to look. Now, I'm not pleased with the way that looks. These half-formed sections at the side, this big open gap at the front, I'm not a fan of that at all. I don't like it much. This is where one of the lights go in here, so I guess one of the reasons they did that was to expose the light maybe as the weapon at the front end. For my money, I think that just looks a bit ugly. So I'm going to put it back to the way I like it before I continue. So in ship mode, we can still use our little light effects, and there at, is that the right way? No, wrong way. They're at the top. So there's one. There's two. The one inside you can't see. The one in the front you can barely see. And if you want, you can put the one in the back as a kind of engine, but you know, you won't be able to see that on camera here. Let me just turn it around. So it makes for a good engine effect. Pretty nice. Apart from that, we still have access to some of the turrets. So we have turrets up here on the top. These little sections are articulated. They don't do much. I think that was just the simplest way to attach them, letting them be free floating like that. And we've got this one turret here. Oh, and another turret down here. Awesome. So he's not defenseless by any stretch of the imagination in spaceship mode. He has guns that can target in multiple directions, as well as the big primary weapon still available to him at the front. So it's really pretty awesome spaceship. Just really heavy, so my arm's sticking out like that. It's hard to hold. Such cool detailing. All that detailing really helps add scale to this guy. So when I hold him to the camera, my eye sees that as huge. It's not just ordinary size transformer. It looks like something that's really massive, and you can imagine that any one of these little sections might be doors or what have you. Other guys might even be able to inhabit him. Very nice indeed. The little Omega tank that I showed you before has the ability to fold out these treads and make kind of wings. So I'm guessing that the purpose of this is as a little spaceship to fly along with the bigger spaceship, because there's nowhere for this guy to go when he's in spaceship mode. So he has to be able to get around somehow. So I think that's what this is for, although I can't be 100% sure. One final note on the transformation: with a little bit of tweaking, you can make this kind of base mode. Now, I'm not going to show how to do it because it's different depending on whoever does it, but I've done it this way, which is basically just the spaceship with the legs twisted around and the arms sticking out. And I feel that this is really intended to be done this way, because if you look at the rocket component, which is the two arms stuck together, this strut, which was the upper part of Omega's arm, can exactly fit up with this groove here as a boarding platform. So it looks like the dimensions of the figure really support this as a base mode. It's a pretty good sized rocket too. I mean, the rocket in itself is, what have we got here? It's a 13-inch tall rocket, so that's quite a massive Transformers prop if you're intending to play games with it. I don't much care for the proportions of that rocket. It looks a little bit bulky on the top, a little bit weird, but it's still pretty cool. And again, we have access to the turrets in this mode, so the base is not defenseless, especially considering that we have the little Omega tank to guard it against any Decepticon attack. So my final thoughts on this guy. I mean, obviously you can tell from this video that I really like the figure, and it's pretty nice in everything that it does. The one big stumbling block where a lot of people are not going to be able to get this is the huge price. So it's at cheapest, I got it from Robot Kingdom for $2.99. Captured Prey, I think, has it for round about $3.50. I guess depending on where you live, the shipping is what determines which one you go with. But that is an expensive toy. I think the only other Transformers figure that I would have paid anything near that price for will be the upcoming reissue of Fortress Maximus from Takara, probably next month. So at present, this is the most expensive transforming robot that I've got that is Transformers related. And having said that, what we paid for Hercules, all told, I paid probably closer to $700 for Hercules. So a robot which is a little bit smaller, I've paid a lot more for. So I guess it's all a matter of perspective. Admittedly, Hercules does have 6 robots who do other things as well, which justifies his extra expense, and he wasn't all in one go. But this definitely is an expensive piece. But in the scheme of things, I think the value proposition, $300 for this huge figure, is not terrible. I think in the scheme of third-party items, this is probably relatively cheap if you look at it from that point of view. Still, being relatively cheap doesn't mean it's actually cheap, and coming up with the money to pay for this guy is a huge headache, and I'm sure that a lot of people just don't want to suffer whatever it takes to end up getting him, which I can fully understand. But now that I do have this guy, I can highly recommend it to anybody out there who thinks they might have the cash and like to have it, because it's a quality piece. I find it hard to have a point that I can say bad about this. I mean, obviously I really wanted the face to be in here, and at first I decided not to buy it just because of that, but I saw that it looked like it was an easily replaceable part, so I'm sure that eventually we will get a face. So that I've kind of given it a pass on not having a face. Other than that, the only flaw that was with mine is that in one of his legs here, there's a tiny rattle. I think there's a little bit of plastic floating around loose inside there. It doesn't seem to affect the toy in any way. And as far as QC issues goes, that's a pretty minor QC issue, just to have some rattle inside. I've had far worse problems that have actual implications besides that in the past. I guess one other minor downfall was this arm, but you can see that given the right angle, it can hold the weight of the blaster if you angle it out a little bit. So although it is a little bit too weak here, it's again not a huge flaw. And when you get the overall product in hand, little stuff like that seems to be less important. Now, it is very heavy and hard to play with, so I don't imagine I'll be doing much with this besides looking at it in this pose on my shelf, because just handling it is a lot of work. The thing weighs more than 3 kilograms, which it's a considerable weight. But it's much less than Fortress Maximus, and I don't play with him much, but I still enjoy that figure. So basically that's it. If you can afford it, go out and get it. You won't regret it. It looks good. It works good. It's got pretty flawless QC. Let's just hope Planet X come up with something else totally awesome for their next piece. Maybe a Triptychon? I don't know. Anyway, that's my video review for Planet X's Project Genesis, aka War for Cybertron Omega Supreme. I'm Odeean, and thanks for watching.